States receive 100% of the state GST. So tax devolution, which is suggested by the Finance Commission, tells very clearly that 100% of what you collect in GST is with you, 50% of the IGST goes to you, 41% of the central GST also goes to the states.
मोदी जी देश के प्रधानमंत्री हैं, वो गुजरात के भी प्रधानमंत्री हैं और बिहार के भी प्रधानमंत्री हैं। गुजरात में आज वहां पर इन्वेस्टमेंट समिट हो रहा है, 20 बरस से हो रहा है। वहां बिलियंस एंड बिलियंस ऑफ डॉलर्स का इन्वेस्टमेंट की बात हो रही है। गुजरात में एक शहर है सूरत, जहां 5 लाख से ज्यादा बिहार के बच्चे मजदूरी कर रहे हैं। एक वो समिट, उसका छोटा ही स्वरूप बिहार में भी होना चाहिए था। गुजरात के लोगों ने तो 26 MP जिताए हैं ना मोदी जी के, हम लोगों ने तो 39 जिताए हैं। हम लोग का इतना भी हक नहीं है।
If I give 1 rupee from Tamil Nadu, the union government is giving only 26 paise. When Karnataka contributes 1 rupee to the union government, the return they get is only 16 paise.
16 paise.
Yeah.
And similarly for
Telangana, it is 40 paise.
Kerala, it's 62
paise. Andhra Pradesh is 50 paise.
The governors have nothing to do, nothing to say.
Dotted lines, you have to sign, that's all.
If you look at the way they fund the schemes, as the Honorable Chief Minister pointed out, when they start at 80-20 union to state. In 2 years, it's 20-80. 20% their money, 80% our money.
A person from Karnataka who pays 100 rupees tax, only 13 rupees comes back to Karnataka. Whereas somebody who pays 100 rupees tax in UP or Madhya Pradesh, 333 rupees goes back to UP and 292 goes back to Madhya Pradesh. We are not against money going to other states, but not at our own cost. If you keep us economically well nourished, we are the ones who are creating employment. We are the one who's creating infrastructure. We are the one who's putting India on the world map. You can't do this to Karnataka.
Hi Sathya, it's great to be back on the Monthly Ones podcast. How do we make complex issues or national debates more relevant for Aam Aadmi, the Mango people?
That's nice. It's always nice to be back talking to you on Monthly Ones for Mango people.
For Mango people.
And make it useful for people.
We are the Mango people.
We are the Mango people. Of course we are. We are not experts.
Yeah,
we are expecting to deep dive into things that helps people understand. So yeah, Monthly Ones for Mango people sounds nice.
Okay, there are so many intricacies, so many complexities in these things, and these have to be understood from the point of view of experts who have put in many years and months into their work. So it kind of helped me a lot because it's very interesting, and it is how active citizens can be born. So welcome back again.
And I like this beanbag setting. We should probably try this once in a while.
Yeah.
We will go back to the other room also sometimes, but
Yeah.
I think we should switch it up, and it makes me feel more comfortable talking more informally. I don't know what the table does in front of me. It makes me feel like I'm doing an interview with someone. But I like that because that also makes me a little more serious. But hey, today is relaxed.
Yeah.
Tell me, I think the topic will be serious.
Yeah. So after the first 2 monthly ones that we did, this is a nice segue to, take actually a hot topic that's on the national consciousness right now, and see how the transformation of information into understanding what the nitty-gritties of that particular topic is. So in this case, we are going to discuss the last topic that you had on your podcast, which is the North-South divide. I don't think it's such a divide, but yes, it's in the consciousness of everybody, especially in the South, that we feel that we are being shortchanged for all the hard work. How much of it is true? How much of it is stuff that we should be actively following? And what should we learn from these things? These are the stuff that we want to come up in this conversation. But let's break down that debate.
Okay.
There are different sides saying their side of the story, but what should we as normal citizen, Aam Aadmi, need to know about this debate? What's your take on that?
No, I think we all came from that angle, and I did do that episode which broke down a lot of concepts of the devolution and things like that. But initially, being where we are located in Bengaluru and being South Indians ourselves, it is natural for us to have that bias, right? It is natural for us to feel, oh, look, there is injustice happening. Let's see what's going on, right? But the way we kind of have to look at it and objectively evaluate seems to be lost in all the conversations. But every side has to tell its story and then see how do we arrive at a politically convenient or naturally as equitable as possible kind of a solution that helps our thought process. And I don't know if we are going to debunk anything, but I think we can at least approach it as to how we understood the problem.
Yeah, I mean, we're giving so much, like for example, what Karnataka is saying, that we're giving for every rupee, we're getting back 15 paise from the state. You know, at the outset of hearing that number, anybody feels a little, shocked. And we feel that, that's not correct. That's not right on the center's part to do this to us. That's where even I began. Even I felt, these things are real, and we need to do something about it. We need to force the government to, give us more what is due to us, as opposed to what has been given to the other states like UP and Bihar and other states that are getting many, many times over. But what really got my attention was to see how much of truth is any party saying, whether it is the state government or the central government. Of course, the state government has a point. They're saying exactly what I said, but how are they devolving when it comes to their side of the story? But that's for later. But for the center keeps saying that, we have been giving much more than what the previous governments have given. That's their line of the story. So depending on which line of the divide you are in, it doesn't necessarily be South Indian or North Indian. It could be one party ideology to the other party ideology. You might have some kind of leanings towards either side, but still, generally, people still think there's a uniformity of understanding that yes, South Indians are not getting their due. So I kind of broke it down to 4 parts for this session. Basically, 4 learnings from my journey of how to break down this debate. As a citizen of this country, what should I know and what is the truth? Somewhere between what the state and center is saying lies the truth. And that this pursuit is to figure out or unearth that truth and ask more pertinent questions.
Okay.
So this is how I have devolved my pursuit into 4 learnings basically. First step is, how do we as citizens consume this story? Okay, we'll begin with that. The second one is, how do you think the center should devolve? The third would be, what should the state be doing? What is the state's devolution plan? Is there a finance commission here, and what is the finance commission's formula? Who gets what, and all of that stuff. And the fourth is, how does it matter as a citizen? You can be part of this conversation anywhere in the country, but you'll always belong to a state or a city. What is that state doing to you as the citizen? So that's the percolation economics, right? In the end, how do you benefit? And what do you need to do in order to ask the right questions to the right people? So these are the 4 broad things that I've broken this conversation down to. Now I'll begin with that first step. How do we as citizens consume this story?
There needs to be more rigor by people who chime in on this issue. I've had a lot of comments on the earlier episode as well, where I talked about the devolution, the tax, and all those things. It's like these tend to be technical issues at some point in time, and you need to be able to understand. So one of the first things is understand what is taxation, right? The Central Taxation Act, what it says is that a tax is not a quid pro quo kind of an item where you say, I give 100 rupees, I have to get 100 rupees back. It is collected in order for, in our social contract, it is collected. It's been this way for ages, from the times of the kings. The tax was collected for doing whatever activity you are doing, and then it was used to perform certain activities by the government in order to keep the general janta and all the
For welfare of the public,
for
yeah.
welfare, for improvements, providing you more facilities, guarding the country, all of those kind of things. So there are a bunch of activities that the government as a whole does, which needs money, and the people who are able to contribute the money for under different heads. And in a contemporary society like ours, there are broadly a few things. On consumption, you pay something called a goods and services tax, which is collected. On the work that you do and the income that you earn, you pay something called an income tax that you do. And companies also pay something called a corporation or a corporate tax. Largely, these are the things that they collect. And when they collect, you cannot say, give me all that you collected back to me alone. So there will be some apportion back to other welfare measures that are being done. There is, however, in spite of not having a quid pro quo, the devolution of these back to you and to others in the nation that we have, in the country that we have, that the government governs, it gives back in different ratios. And these ratios, even though they are determined by a formula, by a set of very well knowledgeable, educated people who go through scientific measures of making that formula, it can be altered on a 5-year basis. And the political nature of it is that this jostling has to happen. Is that when I'm doing so much of work, how can you make better devolution happen? And one of the conclusions from the previous episode, I'll link it in the show notes if they have not seen, is to understand that performance needs to be rewarded more rather than wallowing in where you were already.
So for 70 years, the performance has been almost the same. That's one of the grounds that most South Indian leaders are telling or pointing out to the North, the states that are not doing well, right? So in 70 years, if it hasn't happened, and now if you are raising that question after the formula has been formed, why wasn't it done while the formula was being
It's always done. So this stuff, these finance, you will go back and see all the reports. For example, I looked at the 14 Finance Commission when I was doing my homework for the previous one. Kerala was always shouting horse, right? They were saying, you're not devolving enough, you're not giving enough money, we are doing so well, we are doing well on all these. Or all the South Indian states have always, every time the Finance Commission comes, they do raise these issues, and that's why certain improvements are made. Every 5 years you have an opportunity to reform this better and better, and it has happened. Like, for example, you have the tax collection efficiency that is also included, some small 2.5%. You can always go back and say, if you are doing better in collecting the tax for you, why don't you give me a little more? So maybe the next Finance Commission will come back and say, okay, we'll bump it up a little bit more, right? So what we should watch out for in this, I feel, as citizens, when we chime in on this, is to also see how have these formulas evolved over time, and are they improving or staying the same or regressing? Right? The point you made about this government of the day saying that we have devolved far more than we have ever did. Of course, the base effect is there, right? If you're given 100 rupees and you give 102 rupees, you would have devolved far more. So you shouldn't talk in absolute amounts. What you should be looking at is as a percentage from where we were for 5 years ago. Does this Finance Commission do better? If the old one didn't do better, can the next one do better? We always have to look forward and see. We have always complained, all state governments have complained when the Finance Commission comes and meets the states. They do consult before. While the terms of reference is set by the current government of the day, for example, in the 15th Finance Commission, when they were setting the terms of reference, they said, can you keep the devolution to 42%? Right?
that
So
happened, right?
yeah, it happened. So 41 was what they gave a little bit more to the center and said, can you, the central government always says, can you give me a little more? I want to do a little more. Can you give me more money so I can do something else? I want to buy more planes, or I want to spend more on defense, or whatever it might be. They say, give me more. So that always happens. And there's a lot of that that continues to happen. What we have to look at is, we are right now fighting for that pie of 41% that was given last time, and even in that there were cesses and surcharges that they are not devolved, right? That's almost up to 10%. So effectively the states are only getting some 33-34%,
Yeah.
right, of the entire contribution back. Now that you can divide it in this way, that way, and improve, that can definitely happen in the next finance commission. So it's a good thing that the states raise this issue, not divisively, but with a hope of saying reconsider these things and putting pressure on the finance commission to consider good performance also.
So I think we kind of pretty much covered the second point, which is how do you think the center should devolve the monies, right? So
I think so. So what we have to look at is I am not in a position to say that you and I have the answer to that question,
yes.
but I want to leave that question now for people to think about and say follow the process, understand this whatever formulas or whatever the process is, and understand who is putting out what kind of solutions to these problems, and then arrive at everybody thinks this is the best way to do stuff, right? There are experts who will say this is what we can optimally come out with, which satisfies everybody or which dissatisfies everybody equally, right? So how is that going to be arrived at, and how much less political interference is there in that, and how much more professional calculations are involved in that, and that also suffers from lack of data and other things, right, at the state level. Now we only can prompt people to say there might be better ways. Let's just keep an eye on it and see what they come up with. Everybody can have a solution of this is the best way, but there has to be some amount of negotiations that happen and they come out with, and for the next 5 years we have to live with that, right? And what are the goals of that is, as per the constitution, they're just supposed to get these tax monies devolved somehow. But there is a political nature of this, which is you have to go back out there and talk to these financial commissions and lay your things on the table and see what they come up with. The goals are not defined as anything more. The 16th Finance Commission is even more broader. At least last time the center said give us 58% or 59%. This time they're not even saying that. Just follow the Article 267 or whatever it says, and then just do your job. That's all they say. So everything needs to be done by the Finance Commission.
Sure. So we understand in kind of in a broad way that I think everybody just gets stuck till here, including me. When I got into hearing, learning about this, I realized my depth of understanding, or the people that I spoke to, we're not experts or anything of that sort. We just read the newspaper, watch some YouTube channels and things like that. Till here is where we understood things, in the sense like, okay, the state and the center, the tussle between them, and how much the money gets devolved. Is it fair? Is it not fair? This is something that I think predominantly many people understand till here. But there's a very pertinent question that comes after this, which comes with delving a little bit deeper. That is, how should the state devolve?
So this is a very interesting question, because this aspect nobody explores. Everybody wants to dabble in national politics, but nobody wants to dabble in local or state level issues, right? So there is a state finance commission which is constitutionally mandated, which every state is supposed to do. Now every state does that in different ways. Not every state does that. Some states do not even, they go without doing a good job of it. But the State Finance Commission takes all the receipts of the state government as well. Remember now, while you pay income tax and corporate taxes and GST and all those things to the center, the state also raises its own revenues.
Yeah.
Right? There's something called own revenues, which is
I think the SGST also comes to this.
That will come back. It's a devolved money that is also in the kitty. The corporate taxes are also devolved and is in the kitty, but there are own revenues that are collected directly by the state, which is like stamps and excise duties. Stamp duties, which you buy real estate, you pay a stamp duty of whatever 6-7%, whatever you do, and those are substantial. And excise duties on liquor and other things. And there is
entertainment tax and
a lot of other smaller taxes, but the biggest
tax.
chunk in that is these things: stamp duties and registration, excise. And vehicles, the road tax and other things that you pay for the vehicles, right? That's a substantial amount. So knowing that this is what it is, you will not wonder that the state government wants to get more real estate work done, so they can do this. Wanted to drink more liquor, so you can get more excise.
I think Bangalore is most expensive.
Oh yeah. In this budget, it has actually been, I think,
200% or 150% or something is on the liquor.
yeah, it's become
Tax that we pay.
170% now on the beer and other things. But you also look at vehicles, right? Why are people buying more vehicles? Because the state's own revenues depends on how much vehicles you buy, and that's how they get the taxes, right? So now
So
this
we don't have
amount,
enough roads for all those vehicles.
so that it has externalities in how you do this, right? So be that as it may, what this means is this also has to be further devolved to the cities. One of the questions people are asking, in fact, even the finance minister asked us, if Bangalore or Mumbai says in your state,
That's what
I contribute more revenues.
That was what I was coming. You know, Bangalore in this context is the South India of Karnataka.
It is literally in South Karnataka.
Yeah, and Bangalore is asking, okay, we contribute about 55% or 60% to the state's GDP. What does Bangalore get in return? How much does Bangalore get in return? And even inside Bangalore, there are many areas, I think 4 or 5 areas that contribute maximum. They are the South India of Bangalore itself.
That is true.
So in different levels, these things can be broken down. Yeah.
The state government's finance commission of Karnataka did a wonderful job of actually rewarding Bengaluru, right? How did they do that? So they gave around 70% of
This is the fourth.
The fourth and the third also. They did quite a good job. Now we are in the fifth finance commission, which will produce the report for the next 5 years, right? In fact, ideally, the budget should have been presented based on the finance commission report and how much devolution needs to happen. But here's what, forget the exact amounts, but look at this. 70% of their total kitty that they have, including all of the devolved monies plus their own revenue together, net non-loan revenue, what they call own revenues, that 70% goes to Panchayati Raj institutions, which are basically town panchayats and those kind of institutions. 30% goes to city municipal corporations and town municipal corporations and Bengaluru kind of regions. Now, you could again argue that why 30, why 70? Again, we go back to the fundamentals of tax devolution.
Now we understand it. When it comes to state, we want our other provinces also to gain from what we are doing. Yeah.
Considering that is what we are looking at, 70% goes to those panchayats and the city corporations get around 30%. In that 30%, interestingly, in the third finance commission which was done, they had kept 28% for Bengaluru alone, especially.
Wow. Okay.
The rest were called as city corporations, town municipal corporations, CMCs. Everybody else got some, and the city corporations and the town municipal corporations got a little more, maybe not 28%. But they called out BBMP specially, separately, and said this city needs more funds, so we will give it a 28% weightage. None of the other corporations came and said, why did you give more money to Bengaluru? So there is a proof that you can reward good performing places. In the Karnataka State Finance Commission, it was done that way. So there is a precedence for rewarding good performing places to say, I will not kill this golden goose. Right? So a 28% was called out. It is very significant. And they said BBMP, not just classified under all CCs will get this much. So other city corporations got around 20% or 21% or whatever, and Bengaluru was devolved 28% untied grants, which was given. But be that as it may, whatever that amount means, the example is what I want to hold out for performance related devolution. Now you can call that a formula, and it was borrowed. The third finance commission, which was there 10 years ago, plus the last 5 years of finance commission, did that. And it is possible that if it has grown, you can do more, right? Bengaluru couldn't come back and say, give us more. The argument that you cannot reward good performing places doesn't hold good, because this State Finance Commission has tried to do that very nicely in a way that you reward Bengaluru a little more. But what is interesting in that is the state, beyond just this devolution, has been giving out separately a lot of grants, tied grants under the Nagarotana scheme. There's a scheme like that for funding maybe road development, and mostly goes into road building and road development and all those kind of things. So they've been trying to channel that. What is more critical now is that the state is trying to develop these cities on their own, but there is a fundamental problem in how the cities are governed. And I think that might be a nice segue to get into the next point.
Yeah. Which is, okay, we've understood what the state has done in the third and fourth finance commission. The fifth one is yet to come. I think you said it's going to be in February, right?
This February they are supposed to release for the next 5 years. Let's see how that comes out, when they are due, they are extending their time or whatever it is.
But the budget preceded that.
The budget preceded that, because this is anyway 2021 22 23 was 21 to 22 or 22 23 was already a part of that devolution anyway. Ideally, if you are going to give for 23-24 in the Finance Commission, your budget should have waited for that, or should have timed it so that you got that, and then for the next year took that devolution and announced that. So I'm not very clear about that part. I'd like to go read up and say when that stopped or did not stop. But ideally, you should time it such that the Finance Commission gives you the indication of how you need to devolve for the next year and the next 5 years.
So yeah, I think we should have more conversation. I mean, more people from this state at least should, if they're able to ask the question between the state and the center divide, then they should be able to at least opine on these things after fully knowing these kind of, I mean, state finance commissions and how much of devolution happens for the city and what actually transpires into ground action with those funds, right?
But here's what interestingly the State Finance Commission points out also. In its report, it very clearly says the way we measure our GSDP, the tax collection, and a lot of these things, there is huge paucity of data. In fact, the State Finance Commission ends up even doing an audit of the budgets of each of these cities that they need to devolve into. So they go through tons of data and understand and ask them, give me what you have already spent, give me. So half of these people don't do proper budgets. The ability to do all of those things at the government level is not there. So the state government ends up having all of the data from the revenue department for all these people. Whatever they get is what it is. They've given money, they don't know how they get it back, and the quality of the data is really bad. So the Finance Commission in the states, and it could be even worse in some states. We are one of the better states in which we have got something at least done, right? Bangalore incidentally has been getting a lot of money additionally, right? So the grants have been almost every government comes in for every year, they end up giving 6,000 crores, 8,000 crores. Those kinds of grants are coming in different forms, right? The cities are beginning to not have their own revenues properly done. In fact, I'll get into that segue of the city level then.
I think, yeah, I mean, among the south cities, Bangalore is the leader in terms of its GDP, right? I mean, some 320 billion, 23-24 or 24-25, I'm not sure. I think that's the projected or the current, I think. Versus Chennai, which is I think 120 or 140 billion dollars. So that way, I think Bangalore is one of the biggest city in the south in terms of GDP size. So that brings us to the last step of understanding the whole debate is how does it matter to me? I'm a citizen of Bangalore. Yes, what state devolves and provides us in terms of infrastructure, in terms of welfare, those are stuff that should matter to me. Because I don't have much say as a private citizen into what is happening between center and state. That's a conversation good to know, but I don't have much to do or participate or contribute to that, except paying our taxes on time. But in the state, especially in Bangalore, we're all part of Bangalore, when that money comes down, how should it matter to me, and what is my not forget the contribution that we all know. What is my voice, and is my voice heard? Does my voice have a place in this devolution process?
The short answer is no. I'll tell you why. Because there are 3 levels of devolution. There is something called administrative devolution. I touched upon this in the previous one also, which is, does your city have administrative functions? It usually has. They are headed by engineers, the administrative services and all those things. That anyway happens.
We still have a huge gap for filling up many positions in the city's administration. Right?
Possibly, but at least it exists. There are people in the administrative side of every city municipal corporation or a town municipal corporation who execute things, right? I'll tell you what the challenge, however, is going to be is that there is no political devolution. Lots of cities in India, many of them, many big ones in fact, take Bangalore itself for example, does not have an elected city government or a council. And it occurs from many of our commentators over the past many podcasts that I have done have pointed out that the city government as an official body was recognized in 1992 by what is called the 74th Amendment. It also came with the 73rd, which applies to the Panchayat Raj, that was called the Panchayati Raj Act, and this was called the Nagarpalika Act, where the Palikas, the Nagarapalike, the Bengaluru, Brihat Bengaluru Maganagara no, they came into formal recognition. But even after 25-30 years of this thing existing, the lacuna is that the 74th Amendment says that the state may constitute a city council. It doesn't say that the state should constitute or shall constitute. So it is easily extinguished in this parlance of what they use. It is called the state government has not had an elected city body, has not constituted or held elections for local corporations for many years. That is your biggest lacuna, because your voice can only be done through your elected corporator or a councillor. If you don't have that, the administrators are not going to be liable to your voice, not accountable in the way that your political representatives are. So by not having a council and not having a corporator, the state government directly appoints an administrator from the IAS cadre and says, I will tell you what to do, here's the money, just go do it.
Okay.
And you will have the minister for Bangalore, all of those kind of things. One of the first things that we should recognize is, however imperfect the councillors may be, it is important to have them.
Have one, yeah.
Right? And then you start having the political devolution. The financial devolution to the State Finance Commission does happen, and it goes through the administrative cycle. But own revenues that Bengaluru city raises, a huge percentage of it is just property tax. Everything else is small things, sales, the tax on trade and trade licenses and all of those kind of things. Whatever it is, right? Those are small revenues. Biggest revenue of around 4,500 crores that we are raising is that the current budget of BBMP says we need 11,000 crores. Where's the rest going to come from? All of these things that the state government gives you. That itself will not be. So every time the state government announces in the budget that Bengaluru will get 6,000 crores, Bengaluru will get 8,000 crores, most of these are channeled through specific grant of Nagarotana scheme. Will say, I'll give you through that, spend it on the roads. The untied grants in which the city government is expected to find out what projects they need to spend on is very little. So you're always running a deficit budget, even though you will, BBMP's budget always assumes state government will give me more than what I ask, and hence somehow I will wing it and I have a surplus. It doesn't come from own revenues. Own revenues does not cover, and there are not too many avenues in which BBMP is raising taxes. Now they are raising the property taxes, and that collection is also very bad. So the State Finance Commission doesn't come into the tax efforts. Right. So the formula that can be given in the State Finance Commission is what are your own revenues and how are you raising it, and assign a percentage. Like just like you have a 2.5% tax effort in the Central Finance Commission on the 15th, the 5th commission should come back and say there should be own revenue. The other question you asked, do I have a say in the State Finance Commission? If you had a city government and they placed requests, the administrators will place a request, but they don't have the political power to negotiate on your behalf.
Yeah.
It's an administrative function, and the Finance Commission is also made by a lot of administrators and other people. So it's important now then to have your voice and push for local councillors that you can speak with and have them devolve further. So the next question you asked is, there are richer parts of Bangalore. If we had 199 watts that we have now, we might have 240 or whatever they were delimitation for the next government if it ever comes. These 199 watts, some watts are bigger and richer.
Yeah.
In the east of Bengaluru, you know them.
Yes.
Right. So those from the Outer Ring Road onwards have a lot of tech parks. They contribute to a lot of income, whether it is taxes or vehicles or whatever else, stamp duties and registration, because real estate is the biggest contributor. So having that, somebody might come and ask somebody in West Bangalore or something or South Bangalore and say, why should you be taking all the money? They may not ask it in that way. They might say, give us more facilities instead. Right? It is natural. It's the same question the state is asking the center. The parts of the city is asking the state. The parts inside the city, the wards are asking the city.
Yeah.
Why are you giving somebody else more? Why is all the development happening somewhere else? Why am I not getting even the basic necessities that I need? Whatever the basic necessities could be within quotes and quotes. So this is again coming back to who will build that cap. You're supposed to have ward committees. Who will do that? The administrators will execute the ward committee thing, but where is your corporator in that? You don't even have a corporator or a councillor to sit in that ward committee. The wards then need to have devolution at that level.
So right now the ward committees are not happening because we don't have a city government, right? So there
Correct.
is no mayor, there is no councillor, corporator thing where every ward can be, the citizens can go and raise some questions at the ward level and actually get things done or get clarity on the projects that are being done in their ward. So it just reminds me of a Milton Friedman's quote where he says, it doesn't matter who you vote to power, it matters how you make things politically profitable for him to raise it and make it turn into a policy. There comes the voice of the citizens. If enough citizens ask the right question to the right kind of people, then that political profitability comes into play for the politicians to actually get the city government in place, put the city government in place. There might be city elections and stuff like that. We all get involved in it. We vote and we get a city government. Therefore, all wards get activated and people can be actively part of the devolution process itself in the city at the city level. I think that was my ultimate learning, the final learning from the whole process or from this whole debate. From this whole debate, my learning was, as a citizen of Bangalore, what can I do? And this is what I can do. If enough of us raise this question, that the political establishment understands that we're all demanding the same thing, then it becomes politically profitable for him to make sure this happens, that the city gets its elected government. And therefore, the management could be a lot more interactive with the citizens of the country, of the cities, right?
Look, we also need to look at a lot of factors in this. One is it is politically profitable for the MLAs to continue to fix your plumbing.
That's because Bangalore is the cash cow.
Correct. So it is politically profitable for them to come and say, I want to be visible right now. I want to solve your problems in your house, in your plumbing, in your carpentry, whatever, right? Instead of making laws, is it politically profitable for them to make laws instead? Will you pay attention to the laws they make? You don't. Like I was talking yesterday with one of my colleagues, they have passed in some kind of a civil engineers bill which makes it mandatory for architects and other professionals who do conceptual designs and master plans also to get an approval from a civil engineer to get their chapa before you go ahead. And that bill is being passed. Where is your involvement in that? Architect Association didn't even know this thing was happening, right? And that they are now being susceptible to rent-seeking behavior by somebody else for the work that they do. So people are squeezing in. Now civil engineers become like auditors. You have to get their chapa on verification before you go ahead, and that rent-seeking happens. We are continually having politicians make laws, and you don't know how to pay attention to these things. They are not publicized. You don't know what laws are coming up. You have to constantly watch for gazette notification, at which point it might be too late. The political consultation process are not there. We had a BMLTA which went through multiple rounds of consultation, but they don't want to do it, because they want to rally to the fiefdoms here. And then there is the other angle, right? Let us assume you gave a lot of money to BBMP. Will you get more electricity? No, you will not.
But that's BESCOM, no?
That's BESCOM. What happened? That is the Bangalore Electricity Distribution Company, right? What about sewerage? Will you get more sewerage or better sewerage or better water connection, more water connections?
That's BWSSB.
That is Water Supply Board, the BWSSB. Will you get more buses if you devolve more funds to BBMP? No,
BMTC.
because BMTC, the Transport Corporation.
So a mayor doesn't have control over, he has control only over BBMP, the corporation.
So what we have done is, this is another question you have to look at. We have created parastatals, which are separate corporations, which is a good habit of getting the books right, but the devolved funds don't go there. So you can devolve all you want, but these are specific fees that you pay for services that you offer. There are taxes on top of that which goes to the state government directly. The taxes are not even going. So if you pay a tax on top of electricity tax or water supply cess or whatever it is, those go directly into the state government's coffers. It doesn't go into the BBMP's coffers. Even if you're building a new layout, that's built by BDA or BMRDA has a different. So BDA is another.
None of these guys talk to each other.
That's a different challenge. So that's why we wanted the Bangalore Metropolitan Transport Authority, which talks transport, which talks all these things and brings them together. So
So as
Yeah.
basic as the road not getting dug up by different guys after it gets laid using public money. So many times it gets laid and then dug up and then relayed. So that leakage of funds can be
That's a,
stopped.
so that's a project management inefficiency. You don't have proper project management. So all you need is a project management office for BBMP, right? With proper project management facilities, which coordinates between different stakeholders, timetabling those things, and budget allocation. So if BWSSB get budget allocation for Yelahanka or wherever, you should also make sure that the road budgets are going at the same time to the same place so that they are all synchronized together. So you don't do digging on one side because you want to lay electricity cable there. You want to do digging on another side of town where the water supply is being given, but the roads are being put in some other place completely because the budgets are allocated separately. Right, the electricity budgets and planning is totally different from the water supply planning and other things, and the transport planning is totally different. The transport planning just takes a look at what is there, where it is more profitable, and puts it out there. So the coordination and project management office of BBMP is another big thing, right? So when you start talking about corporation, devolution, and urban local body, none of these bodies are urban local. They don't, even if you have an elected mayor, he doesn't have any say in how these things operate. So the coordination becomes a bigger challenge. How do you restructure? Some of the cities in India and outside have the mayor taking care of some of these functions, and ward level, right? Let us say you have a budget for a ward and you want to do certain things. There is no P&L accounted to the ward. Probably at a zonal level, some revenues are reported. BBMP zones report some revenues. At the ward level, if you want to make it work, not only should your ward be able to come up with a budget, it should also be able to raise own revenues. That level of devolution, we always have to, when we talk about devolution, it's always about asking someone else to give you a grant of monies. Why aren't you able to raise own revenues? What does your property tax at the ward level should be given to the ward level, allocated to the ward level, maybe collected at the BBMP level, but allocated and said, this is your own revenues. And you have to remain competitive. If you want to give more trade license, if you want to encourage economic development in your ward level, you have to look at mixed use nicely. You can't have all residential zones saying, I want no commercial development here, but I want all the money to live in this place. You are not responsible to raise revenues. You are only responsible for spending. How can you be that? How can you be not balanced? How can at a ward level you not be balanced? You have to think about that. Some places only, this whole ward should only be living area. But somebody else should bear the brunt of all the commercial development and whatever comes along with it and the externalities. But you want to consume because you want it to be devolved. You should also be responsible for raising own revenues at your ward level. Otherwise, East Bangalore will continue to subsidize all the living quarters in the central, some other area, which only wants to be houses, and I don't want anything commercial here, but I want all the revenues to make the best roads possible in my area. How is that possible? You should be willing to balance your development, raise own revenues at the ward level, budget what you are spending, and only ask for the gap that is existing as grants. If you don't understand this concept and ask for that, the politician will just play you. He'll say, yeah, I'll get you everything. You don't worry about that. Your votes. Because residences vote. Commercial places don't vote. That's the imbalance. So budgetarily, the financial management of a ward needs to be looked into. You can keep quiet for your own selfish benefit, but then the politicians will play. Your residences, I'll give you everything, but somebody else bears the brunt of commercial development.
But why isn't any party that comes to power in the state, especially, nobody is even likely to think in the direction of having a city government? Why do you think that is?
Because the power lies in why should the corporator share the spoils of whatever?
Are they not sure that they can win the state elections themselves, or are they afraid that there could be another party that might win and there could be dissonance within the state?
That is democracy. I don't think they are afraid of that. I think they are definitely sure that they rig it anyway to make sure that you get what. But at the end of the day, here's the point of all of this political process and the democracy that we call ourselves. You have to think of political self-determination, being able to have this is the principle of subsidiarity I explained in the previous podcast right up front. The most expense that is borne should be closest to the citizen as close as possible. In our democratic structure, a ward that the city defines of around 60,000 people or 1 lakh people that is delimited is the closest administrative power. Most of the expense comes there. In your house, you can put up the framework, but it's the plumbing and the furniture that takes most of the time. So all of your end connection, the last mile to your house and how it is built, where the properties come up, how you pay, how you manage that is where most of the expense is. So I think this boils down to the what is active citizenship and why it is important that you think at the most local level in all of budgeting is if you want to pay attention to finances at the union government level and fight for this and take sides and all of these things, come back and take sides at the local level, at your ward level. Ask for budgets at your ward. None of the wards are empowered to make their own budgets. They may do it because some non-profits are coming in and helping you do that. None of the wards actually conduct ward committee elections. Ward committee meetings. They might do it because some non-profits are pushing it and some administrators are willing to do it and some MLAs are willing to sit, but the regularity goes down. None of the ward committee meetings happen because your councillors are not there, so you don't have a city elected government which is be there. Whatever the nature of that is, however corrupt or not corrupt it is, you have a voice which is supposed to be encouraged as per the thing. So ask for all of these things at the local level which are completely broken. Even if the 74th amendment only says you may have a city government, what prevents the state today from conducting the elections, doing the delimitations properly and getting it done? If you don't raise your voices on all of these things, you are going to continue to have broken at the point where it matters. It matters to you where you live, what facilities you get, and that can only be fixed at the ward and at the city corporation level. And if that is broken, no amount of screaming your head off with the union government is going to fix this problem. The state will continue to collect and they can be fiscally imprudent as possible and they can get rewarded for that. So I think at the end of the day, we need to focus more on city governance. It's becoming, if you want urban areas to prosper, if Bengaluru wants more devolution for itself, you shouldn't be asking for devolution. You should be asking, how is Bengaluru collecting for itself own revenues?
In other words, accountability.
In other words, actually getting your financial management in place. Are you able to collect own revenues? If your ward shouldn't be subsidizing the other ward, what are the nature of those wards which are living off of somebody else's wards? Which means, are you able to raise your own revenue? That's what people are questioning. At all levels, what are you questioning? Why are you feeding off of somebody else's economic progress? And economic progress comes from at the state level and at the city level, you realize it's only real estate because whatever jobs you create, income tax goes directly back up there and gets devolved. So if you're creating more income and taxes, why isn't the State Finance Commission, other than saying 28% goes to Bengaluru, saying that here are some other financial parameters? Are you able to get more own revenues? Are you able to create more economic activity? How? Is it in real estate? Is it in jobs? How do you get rewarded for creating more jobs? That's what this conversation is about. Economic activity is directly correlated to the jobs you create in each ward. At the ward level, can you create more jobs? What is that? Is it retail? Is it consumptive? Are you generating more GST? Are you creating more employment in your ward? None of those things. You just want to live in an enclave of residences and still want to be, somebody should pay for being just residences in this ward. How can that be possible? We should ask that question of self-sufficiency of economic activity at the ward level and we need to raise that.
Sure, that's a very ideal conclusion of where we should get at, ideally. But right now we don't have water coming in properly. We don't have good roads around just in front of our house. And we have a lot of different levels of corruption that happens within the ward or around here itself. So those things need to be fixed, and I think we've come to a good conclusion to our this nice Mango People session, where I think instead of asking what I can surmise from the conversation that we've been having for the last 1 hour almost, is that while it is important that you understand what happens at the national and the state level, it is extremely important, and at the end of the day affects you directly, that what happens at your ward level and at the city level. Because while you do understand the national, the state dynamics, there's very little you can do to alter the reality of those things. While lending your voice to the right matters, right issues at your city level can actually affect change. And I think with that, we should end this conversation. We've had a great time. Thanks again, Sathya.
Thanks to you for making beanbags available. I like I like sitting on a beanbag and talking, but fairly well said. I think thanks to you for bringing up a very hot topic and channelizing it to what OoruLabs cares about, which is
Yeah.
urban issues and urban affairs. Cities are economic powerhouse. If you don't have economic thinking hat and then you only want to talk about somebody giving you a grant and devolving funds, you're not barking up the right tree. If you cannot think economically generating enough and then going and asking, I did my part now. Now you can say, how do we also help people with the tax? It's not that you'll get all the tax back. But fair is something we need to determine as we go along, right? Putting the right incentives. If you know economic development is there, tweak the tax devolution formulas to encourage more of that in places where it doesn't exist. And that I think is the way to tweak formulas and go ahead and at all levels.
And most importantly, how do you understand these things to make sense at your level, personal level, at your family level, at your community level? So I think that's what we attempted at doing in this conversation.
Yep, and I think we have set our level nicely to have further more conversations on some of the things we talked about. There may be radical things that we can think through, not necessarily radical, but getting into the popular domain of saying responsibility goes all the way down. And if you can't get the budgets for your ward and you don't know how much is being spent, that's the first step. And we will talk more in further episodes about how we get there.
Absolutely.
Probably.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Nice.
So
see you all next week.
See you all next month.
Next month. See you all next month then.
We are monthly ones.
We are monthly ones for mango people.
For mango people. Thank you.